Hi everyone and welcome to a new episode of How I Fix Your Data. Today I have Hope with me, who is sharing an interesting deduplication challenge for a B2C client. So Hope, feel free to introduce yourself and what you do exactly.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me on. Good to chat with you. I'm a managing partner at Revunami. We're a digital strategy and RevOps agency. We've been around for almost 15 years, and we've been really excited about Koalify, and it's been great to work with you on things so far.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And you're mainly focused on the HubSpot ecosystem as a partner?
We're system agnostic, so we work in HubSpot, we work in Salesforce, we work in other CRMs. We're really interested in data hygiene, data quality, integrations, and just supporting all things tied to revenue.
Yeah, perfect. Great fit for Qualify with your focus on data quality. Let's zoom in on the use case that you want to bring today. What type of client is it? What data challenges were they running into?
Yeah, so this client has a really large database of contacts, so somewhere over 4 million. They've migrated into HubSpot. They're multi-brand. They've gone through some acquisitions, primarily B2C with a little bit of B2B. And they're also doing system migrations concurrently. So wrapping up a legacy CRM migration into HubSpot, moving into Shopify. So lots of moving pieces and lots of old data.
Yeah, I can imagine. How bad was their data on a scale from like 0 to 10?
Well, so zero being the worst. I mean, some of their data was very good. It just all wasn't in the same place, right? So like their legacy CRM data was actually pretty good. It was
Mhm.
just getting that into HubSpot, and then so the parts were good, and then the total was kind of a mess. So
Yeah, yeah, I
give
can
it some
imagine.
framework. Mhm.
The single pieces before the migration were okay, but then when you put it all together, it's a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
I can imagine that there were a lot of challenges. Like, what were the main challenges with the data quality for this client? If you have to name like three.
I mean, the biggest one that they were running into that's the most obvious is just that their sales rep would get assigned a lead and call them and realize somebody else was already talking to that person,
Mhm,
which is a bad experience for your customer and a bad waste of time for the sales rep. So that was like the thing that everybody was most upset about. And then beyond that, there's the all the costs people don't see as obviously. With your reports being off, you don't have good metrics on things. Sometimes your students or people who have to log into things have a bad time, resetting an account or something. And then now we know with AI, such a big cost to bad data is that it's costing you more credits and many more prompts to try to get information because you have to keep clarifying when
mhm.
the data is a little bit of a mess and you need so much context.
Yeah, yeah, because AI thinks the data that's in your portal is correct, and therefore, yeah, if it's not correct, your prompts or your questions and the answers that you're getting are not right, and you need to fine tune it.
Yeah,
Makes
plus
sense?
the bloat on workflows in HubSpot. So they have a lot of custom code, really complicated, gorgeous workflows, but they are so much riskier and take so much more time when you're not quite sure, is this the right SMS property or not? Or, how many edge cases do we have? Because our data's all over the place.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of the pains they were experiencing, and that were specifically for duplicates, because like the duplicates were entering the system, they were being called by multiple reps. How did you start the duplication project for them?
Yeah, so it took a lot of planning before we started deduping because they have multiple brands and they were very nervous about combining records in error or losing data that mattered to one group of stakeholders particularly. And
Mhm,
so we spent a lot of time mapping out rules and just explaining to them the way that the tool works and how, what kind of bumpers and safeguards we have in place. And
mhm,
then from there, we moved into testing. And so we started testing in production with test records and just kind of proof of concept, showing them this is
mhm,
exactly what happens, this is exactly what it looks like, and getting sign-offs along the way. So we built a lot of confidence in the process. And then once we graduated from that, then we were merging a handful of live records to show that that worked. And then once we got over that hurdle, then we were clearing out the backlog of records,
mhm,
and so we created workflows that tied to Koalify rules, and we kind of tiered it by data we felt like was for sure a duplicate. Like we have
mhm.
first name, last name, and phone number. We feel very confident that that's a duplicate. So then we could just run the contacts who fit that criteria, who met that rule through the
Hmm.
workflow and merge them. And I think doing that, we merged like 3,000 records, like first go of cleaning up.
Yeah, that's a
And
lot
those
of.
are the kind of like for sure duplicates.
Mhm.
And then we moved through things we felt less sure about, like fuzzy email matching was a much smaller list, and they wanted to look at that, so we tag teamed it.
Hmm.
And one additional layer is we carved this out by brand. So we started with one brand and cleaned all of theirs out, and we waited to do cross-brand contacts until the end, until there was a smaller pool and we could have more people. We really wanted everyone to feel confident about it, so we took our time.
Yeah, great approach. I mainly remember like building trust initially with some
Yep.
small tests, but also along the way doing it gradually. So not bulk merging everything, but focus on certain duplicates first, maybe for one brand only, get their trust, and then move on to the next team that maybe has less trust in the beginning, so
Yep.
that they get to see, okay, it's working for that other team. Nice approach. And then you merged 270,000 records. Do you have an idea how long it took to like get to the point of merging that many records, given
I
like
think
all the
it took
steps?
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, how long it took to get from like when we started with Koalify to when we were merging?
Yeah, yeah,
Well, it took probably like 6 months,
yeah,
honestly. It
yeah.
took a
That's
long time.
yeah, that's building the trust internally. Yeah, it takes some time. It's sometimes the people change that takes longer than the implementation because that's 6 months. How much implementation time do you think you spent?
Yeah, it was a marker of success for me that they have one sales leader there who's very on top of all changes in HubSpot and is very quick to notice anything that's wrong with the data, which we love for that.
Yeah.
But she didn't have any complaints, so we thought she said everything looked good, and we were like, "That's great, we passed the test."
Yes, that was the test. The critical user that is on top of everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. And if you look back at the challenge, like multi-brand was one aspect of the challenge. Next to that, you also mentioned earlier that their speed to lead was essential. Could you explain a bit more what that means for them?
Yeah, so we cleaned out the backlog and then we wanted to turn it on so that it's running in real time. And the goal is to have a lead that comes in, an inbound lead that fills out a form. Maybe it's Jonas and you have two different emails, but the same phone number, same first and last name, and you submit a form with your new email. We want that to be deduped before it goes through lead assignment, because obviously that solves that initial problem of the rep having the wrong lead to call. But the challenge we're running into is that you have to sacrifice a little bit of your speed to lead to do the merge. And so that was a little bit of a cultural change with the business too. We found like some champions internally who are like, no, the quality is more important here. It's also only a segment of their leads. So we adapted their lead flow, and their speed to lead time is very quick. It's like seconds. Like they notice if there's any small delay in speed to lead. It's a volume B2C business, and
Yeah.
so we changed the workflow to branch off if a qualified duplicate is identified, and it runs it through deduping, goes into a list or segment, and then from the segment goes through the lead router again once the contacts are enriched. And
Yeah.
that way, if it already has an owner, it'll be kicked back to the person who is already talking to that lead.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's a crazy speed to lead, like seconds. And how much delay did the data quality or like the deduplication introduced in that process? Because they didn't want that, I assume, but still
Yeah,
quality over speed.
probably a couple minutes.
Yeah, okay. And they were okay for the records that were identified as duplicates, I assume only, yeah.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, for the reps, if they're calling the wrong person, that's not very effective either. And it
Yeah,
doesn't delay for all the records, only the ones that are duplicates.
yeah, yeah, makes sense.
But we did have to let like their data teams and people know that we made the change so that if they see a dip in it, they know that nothing's broken. It's just better data.
Yeah, yeah, nice change. But yeah, Qualify is usually able to detect the duplicates within like a minute or so, depending on the volume that's coming in. Like if you import, it might take a bit longer. But if you're just gradually having form submissions that are being added, then usually like within a minute, it should be detected and flagged. And then the ones that are flagged get through a different flow. and are assigned later on. Okay, cool.
Yeah, merge, they fall out of the workflows that they're in, which is an
Yeah.
important consideration.
Yep, that's a nice approach. You've mentioned a lot of the implementation already, or how you did things. Can you show us some of the configuration that you did for the client?
So for them, some rules like first and last name IP city are too risky. They just have so many people in the same city with the same first and last name. So we made inactive rules that they felt like were too high risk for their use case and have really leaned on first name, last name, and normalized phone number, which they have a workflow that's normalizing phone numbers on the back end. So we write that first name and phone number. For this one, we were a little bit careful in the backlog, but we have it on going forward because they sometimes have people in the same household. It could be like a father and son, but they're different students. So that was an interesting kind of outlier. They use mobile phone and SMS a lot, so that's been a really good one. And you can see they still have some duplicates in here that we're going through, and these are the ones that they've flagged as more risky. So this is the last of our backlog.
Cool.
And email's been a really good one. They had so many variations of email with like fuzzy matching.
Okay, nice. I can indeed see mainly combinations on the first name, last name, and phone number variations.
Yep.
You're continuously merging them, but you haven't cleaned the full backlog because, like, for some uncertain duplicate rules or broader rules, they want to be extra careful.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of them were flagged as carve-outs.
Maybe check primary rules or any specific merge rules or that you want to highlight.
Yeah, so primary rules, the big one is just if they're a student. So you can think of that like if they're a customer.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
And for that, there's a lot of metadata connected and objects and things that they just don't want overwritten.
And for merge rules, any specific properties that you care about? I can see the brands there. That might be an interesting one.
And brands is a really good one. Yeah, that's been very useful for them.
Yeah, because like before in first run, you were only merging within a single brand, and in the second phase, you opened it up to do multi-brands. The native merge would only retain the brand of the primary value, but by applying this merge rule, they would be appended and they would be visible for both brands.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else that you would like to highlight here? The first updated and last updated values?
They're multi-brand, so they have multiple interstates, and they always want to keep the first for those because that's what they're using for their first touch attribution.
Perfect.
And then student is again like customer. So you basically, if any record is a customer, we want to know that.
So that's the configuration for the client. And if you move on to the actual merges, I assume that most of the merges happen through the workflow. Could you share some of these? Yeah.
Yeah, so to clean out the backlog was I used segments to identify the contacts I wanted to run through, and then I have a manual enrollment workflow. So this is like what we did for the single brand only. So we have a workflow with manual enrollment that branches on the brand and then merges the record into its Koalify duplicate. And for that, we used segments based on the Koalify rule. So this is both carved out by brand and then also by the rule and relatively how confident we felt about it.
Yeah. You used a combination of the qualified duplicate rules as a filter criteria in the segment and also the fact that they were part of one brand only, for example.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, that gives you full control and only select those records for bulk merging.
Yeah, and transparency, which is part of trust building too, right? I can point to here's the cohort of people we're going to run through, and then the workflow has a record of all of them that went through, and now we can report on that as well. So it's very transparent, which I think in the past merging was kind of a black box for a lot of users.
Yep. Then you're really going to love our app event that we're going to add next week.
I saw that. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, more on that later. Let's zoom out on the results for this client. So you mentioned already over 200,000 records merged. Yep. What was the main impact for the client after these merges?
Their sales reps have a lot more confidence when they're calling somebody. They're also saving time. They're moving away from feeling like they have to double check manually and check and see if someone has a duplicate before they dial out. So it's reduced some sales friction for them, lots more confidence in the data, and then it's going to have big cost savings for them in HubSpot because they won't be paying for as many contacts. And then also with their AI token usage over time.
Yeah, mainly cost reductions indeed, efficiency, extra trust built, not only with the management teams that were working on the deduplication project, but also with the reps that are
Yeah.
using the data. Nice. Then if you look at the implementation of the project itself, what are some lessons learned that you would share with other people handling such a big, complex deduplication project?
The part that people see, that clients see and users see, is like the iceberg metaphor, is the 20% above the water, and then there's 80% below the water. So for a long time, it looked like nothing was happening, and everyone's impatient, and we were really tempted to just rush it. But I've been doing this long enough to know that that's not the way to go. And once you do that, and you can't get the trust back if it doesn't go well, we push to really take our time and test it and get buy-in. And I think that's it's nice to see that that was the right approach and gives me good anecdote to do that in the future.
Yeah, yeah. Take it easy, build the trust, don't make mistakes because it's very easy to lose the trust. It's much harder to win it back. And from a technical or implementation point of view, any lessons learned?
The big one is just thinking about the ways that merges drop contacts out of workflows. If you have a lot of workflows and enrichment happening, so that's where the testing is really important. And you can test in Sandbox, but you really need to test in production so you can watch the way that records actually move through your system. And it's also where something like Howley, along with Koalify, like combining tools that really help you at scale if you have a complex org, look at all your workflows, look at how the fields are talking to each other, and test all of that. Because when you merge records, you're now like bringing in new data into a contact record that may then trigger other workflows post-merge. So there's just a lot of behavior to think about, and testing is really important for that.
Yeah, yeah, great lessons learned. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, great session, Hope.